Welcome back. You're with News Live. Well, let's go back to our top story for you. The President has concluded his opening address at Nasrec, and a lot coming out of that address. Let's get more reaction now. Our political reporter Aldrin Sampear is standing by. Aldrin, good afternoon.
Well, yes, good afternoon. We continue dissecting President Jacob Zuma's opening speech, and I'm joined here by Professor Boysen. Do you think that the President was at all frank with regards to the state of the party? A lot of emphasis about where the party finds itself, but it almost seems as though that he distances himself from where the party finds itself.
Yes, it's certainly. I think there was frankness, yes. In many respects, his speech was exactly a restatement, a summary of what is in the discussion documents for policy discussions. So it was frank in that way. In other ways, it was almost a surreal experience listening to the President, because he is totally removed as he stands there of any other problems, of the fact that he might have been himself a factor in the ANC's losses, relative losses in the local government elections last year. So, yes, there was owning up to the problems, but simultaneously it is that distance between what we saw on stage and the problems we know the ANC has.
Because certainly, even listening to him speaking about the issue around state capture and saying that the delegates here should sit down and define what exactly is meant by state capture. And quite interestingly, though, is that when you listen to someone like Cyril Ramaphosa speak on the issue of state capture, Cyril Ramaphosa would have the phrase that let's talk about this issue of state capture, and let's talk about these families or certain family that is capturing the state. However, with the President, he speaks of those who have business interest capturing the state.
Yes. That was part of the very careful formulations. So I think the documents were also formulated with that in mind, to help protect the President when he has to present these documents to a meeting. But it's very interesting. I was sitting there as observer in the audience as well, and looking at the blocks who are responding and so on. KwaZulu-Natal carried the President. They were the ones, a big block of them would cheer when he delivered certain points and had a few punches to dish out. But most of the audience there were almost distant from the President sitting there. So it's very interesting will be interesting to see what will prevail, what sentiment will prevail when we get into these discussions.
Well, certainly. Just quickly, we're going to play a quick clip from the President where he spoke about, he says, ill discipline in the party, and speaks about some leaders who go out and speak out against the ANC and how that has led to negative impact on the economy. Not that the President's reshuffle has led to a negative impact on the economy, but those leaders of the ANC who speak out against the ANC, who has led to this economic impact. Just a quick response from you as we tried to play that clip before.
Definitely one of those surreal moments. And the President himself, he is above all criticism the way he presents himself. He is the President, and he is not the cause of any other ANC's problems. And then people wonder, to what extent can the ANC emerge stronger from a conference like this? And the President made very certain he got that message across. You must emerge stronger, find the solutions. But then much of the cause of the problems, by far not the only cause of ANC problems, but much of the cause was standing on stage delivering this message. And that could alienate or mobilize delegates.
Well, let's listen to that clip quickly.
Some members and leaders of the ANC have become primary conveyors of negative information about their own movement. The challenge for the country is that this irresponsible, perpetual negative messaging by our own people has a negative impact on the economy. We need to discuss how we can balance our valued trait of self-criticism with the need to protect the ANC and provide it with the space to resolve problems in a more organized manner.
Well, certainly what we've noticed over the past few months, especially after the August 18 elections, is that the president says in the ending of his clip that we need to speak about issues internally within the ANC. However, what happened after the August 18 elections is that we saw a lot of groups mushrooming inside the ANC, not formal organizations whatsoever. Like we have now the MK Council, we have the Stalwarts, we also had hashtag Occupy Luthuli House. Those were people who said that they were so frustrated inside the ANC, raising issues inside the ANC, and that's the reason that they've gone out and spoken out openly about the state of the party and the poor leadership of the ANC.
Yes, it was really when ANC members and supporters and leaders became more and more aware, and that was reinforced by the local government elections last year, much more aware of the impact of current politics on their support, on their electoral support, and realizing that they are running the risk of losing should Terence continue into a next election. That is when they started doing much more mobilization, and much of the mobilization was at the top leadership. As I said, President Zuma is not the only problem in this party, but he is the leader. He's part of the problem and he is the leader. And that is where this huge dilemma for the ANC comes in. And yes, indeed, he trashed the veterans for going outside the structures, but our structures are so closed. Everybody who objects against the president knows exactly there is no space within current structures. Maybe in the last few months things are slightly opening up, but still the NEC is not managing to take a vote against the president to try and rescue the ANC by removing a big part of the problem. Those structures are closed. And same thing, it's not as if opposition parties, the president trashed them as well for being in parliament. He said they defeated in parliament, but then run to the courts. That's, in a certain very superficial way, can be seen that way. But opposition parties and other civil society groups and people within the ANC are hoping they could be part of that, gone to courts where are serious steps of not at all executive accountability, or there were other structures. The ANC itself is not acting against this president. So one wonders whether a conference like this would actually be the place where the ANC could garner enough courage to act against such a big problem in their own ranks.
Well, it's certainly something that the stalwarts were looking forward to, and that's the reason why they suggested the policy, the consultative conference. However, though, that didn't take place. The president even said that we reached a compromise where we said, let's give you 2 days to discuss this issue around the state of the party. However, they, as the stalwarts, in a very funny way, quote unquote, they decided that no, we're not going to do this. He says that they seem to be an organization on their own as well. And I just want to quickly play the soundbite as well, the clip where the president speaks about the stalwarts and how they've behaved in a very funny way, even though they claim to know the ANC. Just listen in.
Some comrades who call themselves the stalwarts veterans went around the country organizing other comrades because they had some views, and organized those comrades and later reported to headquarters that they've organized comrades at about 101. And these comrades have concerns that they want to discuss. But they did not say we want to discuss this with the leadership of the ANC. They said they want a consultative conference. They took a decision on their own, outside the structures of the ANC, and presented that.
Well, certainly some defenders of the president inside the plenary session, because there were those who were cheering on the president as he spoke out against the stalwarts. And earlier on you were speaking about the different blocks within the organization, within the plenary as well. And when there was a moment when some delegates, and I have to emphasize that some delegates stood up and they sang President Jacob Zuma lead us in isiZulu, Sikokele Zuma. There were some who didn't sing along with those other delegates, and one of those those people was Derek Hanekom. And just looking at Derek Hanekom sitting there on the stage along with the other ANC, NEC members, I just kept on wondering what could be going through his mind at this point.
Yes, certainly. I think those memories of a few traumatic NEC meetings where people tried to move a motion of no confidence in a president, but where they did not succeed. I think those moments are, and the moment of them being reshuffled right out of cabinet as well. Those moments are really there. But he is still a member of the ANC disciplinary structures, and I see heading a committee that looks at discipline at this conference. So it's, yes, I'm sure he would like to get another few people at that disciplinary committee.
I was actually thinking about this, that it's so strange that Derek Hanekom heads this disciplinary committee of the ANC. However, though, it seems as though that the person who faces the most number of allegations in terms of where the party finds itself, probably in the eyes of Derek Hanekom, there has been no disciplinary action against that person, and that person being President Jacob Zuma. Here, the president also spoke about the integrity committee that was set up after Mangahong. But he also says that we should sit back, look and reassess and see whether it has been effective.
You know, the Integrity Committee has tried to get him into a meeting. He has apparently met with them, but then it turned into a friendly discussion. So it's really an Integrity Committee in the ANC whose teeth has been pulled, and there is no strong force, no teeth left there. And the committee is also associated with several of the veterans. So it is really a committee that has been marginalized, put on the sidelines. We see in the discussion documents there are plans now to look at ethics, integrity office. I think they call it an office in the ANC. But whether they will be the lifeblood in it, that remains to be seen. And yes, I also noticed, well, after when the president finished speaking, of course, he launched directly into some of his favorite songs. But when he finished his songs, there was not one of those people on stage who rushed over to shake his hands and saying, yes, congratulations, that was a great speech. He went through the motions almost in a pained way. Interesting too that in much of the frame, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, she was sitting slightly behind where he was standing delivering his address, but sort of half her face was in much of the internal in-hall frame that went out. And she only grinned when he dashed other people and when he said something good about the cause of women that the ANC is promoting. But those are the kind of emotions that they got from her. But most of the people were just sitting there, absolutely stony face. And that is the bulk of his own ANC, NEC, that was sitting there.
And just listening to the president as well speak about not only the state of the party, but also he quoted OR Tambo twice. And there was one specific quote that he repeated where OR Tambo was speaking about, comrades, if you think that fighting against the apartheid government is difficult, if you think that waging a liberation war is difficult, wait until you're in power. It's more difficult to keep the power. And one was thinking about the 2019 elections, because some analysts have argued that if the ANC continues to decline, if the ANC continues at the pace that it is at the moment, you could find a situation where the ANC is on the back foot and the ANC might find itself on the opposition benches post 2019 elections. That
is quite possible if that slide continues at the pace at which it was continuing. And the reasons why that slide was there, those reasons are all still present. The ANC has not cut out those problems. And so it will really be a slide, and the ANC could be in opposition after a next election. And that is where these internal battles and struggles, it's really important. And in many ways, the ANC really benefits from this internal struggle. It's not all bad news, because citizens, voters out there know there is more than one ANC. It's not just the Zumas ANC, there is another ANC as well. And it is in this context that it's so important. The president repeatedly, in about at least 7 places, emphasized the issue of unity. We know this is a new thrust in ANC emphasis in the last week or two. But then too, if they talk unity, they would have to close ranks, elastoplast over many of these problems. And then superficial unity without really resolving these issues in an ethical way could really damage the ANC.
The Mail and Guardian this morning, their front page is leading with the leaked document, the diagnostic document that the Secretary General, Gwede Mantashe, is expected to deliver. And in that report, it points the finger squarely at the doorstep of President Jacob Zuma, speaking about the 2015 cabinet reshuffle, speaking about spy tapes, speaking about the Gupta family and the president's close relationship with the Gupta family. And then one wonders that whether the ANC will be able to turn the trajectory. And when you listen to President Jacob Zuma say that when we have these discussions around why the ANC lost so much power, we shouldn't be emotional about that discussion. Is it an unfair thing to expect from ANC members? Is it an unfair thing to expect from people who went on a door-to-door campaign trying to secure an overwhelming victory for the party during those elections?
I think so many of those people who have been putting in that labor really feel betrayed. And hopefully Gwede Mantashe's report can bring a sense of ownership, of honesty, and then maybe that kind of honesty might help people really take ownership again of their organization, because this is really a point of crossroads for the ANC, because unless they can really consolidate and reverse out of the trouble they got themselves into, and they themselves are also so responsible for that, but they have time to redeem themselves now. And so unless that happens, that kind of betrayal will be there. So I think Gwede Mantashe is in that way trying to bring in that message. There is an ANC that recognizes these problems. And I think the battle is on between President Zuma and Gwede Mantashe when he delivers. It will be behind closed doors where he delivers that report. The battle will be in for the hearts and minds and the debate points that these delegates will take into those commissions.
But certainly this report is a research, of course, that Gwede Mantashe, that the party has done. But the research almost says that the problem is President Jacob Zuma. However, though, it's not us as the ANC who say that, but it's the people that we've polled who are saying that.
Yes, there's always this distance. It's not, we're not accusing, because they know the disciplinary forces can come to bear on them should they try. So there's always that attempt to put in distance. But then it is so important if people in research say that, and the ANC needs to listen to that, because they confirm their allegiance to democracy. President Zuma even affirmed his allegiance to constitutional democracy. And it is the people who will speak. And that is a wonderful thing about South Africa, despite the problems, that democracy remains standing. But then President Zuma, the way he put it in his address just now, was dissing forces in parliament, opposition parties, and in a way indirectly his own party as well, who haven't been coming out strictly in his solid defense in there, but saying that people run away from parliament and funny democracy. We think a few months back where he was answering questions in parliament and was also saying about this funny democracy, and he wanted to tell the branches in here, power is with you. And in that way he again got to that very contentious point he had a while ago. He said the party is bigger than the country, and Parliament is a representative of the country as such. But here he was telling the people that you are the branches, and he in a way almost challenged them. You will tell me to go or not to go. It's you who take that vote, nobody else.
Well, certainly. Thank you so much, Professor Boysen, then joining us post President Jacob Zuma's speech, speaking about the state of the party. But quite interesting as well is that when the president spoke about the issue around land redistribution, is that something that he missed out, and that is amending Section 25 of the Constitution, which he has continuously spoken about. And he said that that Section 25 must be amended. He even spoke in Parliament and called on opposition parties and said that opposition parties who are there in Parliament in the interest of the black majority in the country must come together with the ANC so to form a majority, a two-thirds majority, to amend Section 25 of the Constitution. However, though, this time around in this report, he didn't mention it, and was even asking a colleague there, asking whether this speech is a speech that is composed by the NEC or is it by the president himself. But I heard that it's definitely something that the president would have penned down. I'm now joined by Mr. Zumas, the minister. Zumas, can you please come closer? Asili, just quickly looking into President Jacob Zuma's speech, what are some of the things that you take away from that speech?
The President spoke about the program of radical socio-economic transformation. And as transport sector, we come in whereby we talk about bringing more blacks, in particular African entrepreneurs, into the mainstream of transport, where the road construction, as we speak in South Africa, is dominated by 5 or 4 former white companies. We want to have more blacks getting involved in SANRAL projects. When we are talking about our airports, infrastructure layout and services at the airport is still dominated by white companies. We want more black companies to get involved in delivering services at our airports. The same applies with rail. Rail, in the main, we import components from outside South Africa. Gone should be those days where we should have our components manufactured here and have more black industrialists manufacturing our trains. And also SABUA, which is the Bus Owners Association. More of them are former white companies. We want more black operators of buses. That's how we come in as the transport sector.
Well, the President also spoke about an entity that should be set up that would look into ANC proposals and policy decisions that have been taken and are not implemented. And that entity should be monitoring the implementation of those policies. And it made me think about whether there shouldn't be a similar entity that looks into the transfer of skills in these various sectors and some of the companies that you've just mentioned at the moment. Because even though you would award a tender to a certain company which is white-owned and bring in a black subsidiary, whether it be by the 30% legislation that is put in now, that there should be a black subsidiary, how do you then know that the skills have indeed been transferred?
Government has got an incubation program whereby we know that because of apartheid, where we come from, blacks do not have the same skills with our white counterpart. And through the Department of Trade and Industry and other departments, public works and so on, they try that when you are given a tender, you are also skilled in that trade where you are delivering that service. There are a whole range of skills transfer programs that we have as government. Also, government try by all means for black people to access money in the financial institutions. Though our financial institutions dominated by the 4 banks find it very difficult to extend credit to black people. That's the reason why when you look at the taxi industry, our taxi industry, as we speak, dominated by black operators, they are charged 28% interest rates, whereas the prime rate in South Africa is 9%. Out of that 28%, you will have bought extra 2 taxis. Why? It's because the mainstream banks don't want to give credit to our people. We are looking at that matter. We'll also approach those mainstream banks, but also see to it that development financial institutions should assist our black people to be able to buy taxis at a lower rate, and a whole range of other programs in construction. A black person get a program, a project from SANRAL or wherever, but you find banks do not want to finance that. What kind of a country is that which serves the interests of the minority? It's only in South Africa where the minority control the economy. It can't be.
Well, this has been indeed a long-ranging debate, but the Mangaung Conference, for instance, took a decision for the establishment, I think it was Polokwane, then went over to Mangaung as well, the establishment of a state-owned bank. That has still not happened, and I guess that's probably why the entity that President Jacob Zuma speaks of in terms of implementation of proposals would be so important.
If I heard the President speaking about the issue of financial sector, he emphasized that it is time that the Post Bank should be given the license. I don't know the reasons that the Reserve Bank, through the Registrar of Banks, have not to give the Post Bank license to be a bank. The sooner the Post Bank is given the license, the better. As amongst other issues that the President raised, it will be able to be the distributor of social grants, because as of now, you can see we pay a lot of money on servicing social grant. a lot of money goes to service providers, which is the money which was supposed to be going to the beneficiaries. So I believe that Minister Cwele, my colleague, is doing everything in his power to make sure that the Post Bank is registered as soon as possible.
Do you think that there's resistance from the Reserve Bank to grant the Post Bank this full-fledged commercial license to start operating as a commercial bank and compete with the other 4 big banks?
I don't understand the reasons that are advanced by the Reserve Bank. It was easy for the Reserve Bank to give former white companies licenses to operate as banks. Why does it find it difficult to give license to a government-owned entity which is going to be accessible even to ordinary people in outlying areas, a banking license? This matter must be resolved as of yesterday so that we are able to see to it that poor people who cannot access the mainstream banks are able to use the Post Bank as a financial institution that takes care of their money, and maybe the Post Bank will be flexible in giving credit to emerging entrepreneurs, young people, women, and people with a disability.
Speaking about the Reserve Bank, I wonder what your take is on this. The Public Protector's report on the money, the lifeboat that was received by Benko and then ABSA, and then one of the remedial actions, he speaks about amending section 224, if I'm not mistaken, which speaks to the role of the bank and the mandate of the Reserve Bank. I wonder where you stand with regards to that. Should the mandate of the Reserve Bank then change and also include the socio-economic state of the country and also benefit fellow South Africans?
I can't agree more with the report of the Public Protector. All along, it was us who were calling for the Reserve Bank to be owned by the state. The Reserve Bank in South Africa is among very few. There are very few central banks in the whole world which are privately owned. And there's no reason why we must continue to have our central bank owned by the private sector. So that if it is owned by government, not just only to look at narrow function, but to broaden the function. Not to have the private sector determining our economy, serving their interest. No, it can't be. At this era in South Africa, we need a central bank that is publicly owned, not the status quo that we have in South Africa. Black people find it very difficult in this country to access credit because credit is in the control of those who control economy. So they are not willing to let it go of the financial sector. And as government, we will work very hard to make sure that financial services are accessible to our people. Otherwise, there will be no program of radical socio-economic transformation that will implement.
Do you think probably it is because of what happened in 1994, pre-1994 into CODESA, and then a decision was taken by the unity government at the time to keep the National Party MPs and include them as ministers who would look into the economic cluster of the country, that status quo has been an issue that has still not been resolved? And do you think that this conference has the capacity to reverse that, and finally at the elective conference in December that will be endorsed?
Let me say that it was necessary that we go through the transition that we have gone through to have a government of national unity. It was very, very important to stabilize the politics of the country because there were doomsayers who were saying that if Mandela becomes a president, he's going to take all whites to the sea. That has never happened. There are so many whites who have been Democrats and who have been leaders even in the ANC. But there were those who were spreading wrong message. So it was necessary to have that GNU at that time. However, a decade after, what is critical now is for us to focus on socio-economic emancipation. That's what is critical. So we have laid a strong political foundation. No doubt about that. But now, what is critical, what our people can't wait for, is economic emancipation. And it must benefit the majority, who are the youth and the women.
Will this conference get there?
This conference, in the main, when it comes to economic transformation debate, will focus on a program of radical socio-economic transformation where the wealth of the country should be shared equitably. It can't be that the wealth of this country exclude the majority. It is time that the majority should be in the mainstream of the economy. And I think it is among the major themes of this policy conference.
Also quite important in terms of that is the employment. The employment rates try to increase the number of people that are employed, and President Jacob Zuma spoke about the 1.3% that was forecasted at the budget speech, but he says that post the downgrades and post the economic difficulty that the country finds itself at the moment, that might not even be possible, that low grade. Should President Jacob Zuma take personal responsibility for the possibility of a full-on recession?
In the ANC, we believe in collective leadership. We don't believe in one person taking a responsibility as a person. We lead as a collective. The issue of youth unemployment is a matter that we have to resolve. Some of us who are deployed as ministers in transport, I should see to it that the programs that I roll out in Sanral, in AXA, in all the entities that I lead there, should have a component of empowering young people as entrepreneurs. It is through those programs where the state has invested billions that will be able to make a dent on youth unemployment. If we have the determination and the will, I think we can go a long way. Infrastructure budget in this country is more than 500 billion. That 500 billion should not be dominated by those who are monopolies. It should be, how do we bring women, entrepreneurial businesses and youth to benefit from the infrastructure? Because we want to make South Africa a construction site. And that should not be dominated by those four big companies. It must be that blacks should have a share. It's then that we are going to dent the economy and make sure that those programs are labor intensive, not import machines which are going to take jobs for our people. Otherwise, youth will revolt against that.
But then that goes against the fourth industrial revolution that even the ANC speaks of, that says that, listen, we need to speak about the fourth industrial revolution. Look at the mines, for instance, now. The mines are shedding jobs as well. They can't hold the current number that they have at the moment.
It can be that there is resistance when we talk about the mining charter. It's long that a few companies have been dominating the mining industry. When are we going to have our own people owning those mines? Because these are their minerals. We must, as government, through the Department of Minerals, assist our people. And there are a lot of women who are having interest, for instance, in the mineral sector. Through the mining charter that we have approved as government, we must have more people there. That's what we have to do. But bringing machines to replace people, no, it's not going to dent unemployment. It's going to cause more problems. It's like when you talk of increasing the wages of farm workers, then farmers say, no, we'll import machines from outside to come and do the work which is done by 100 people. I've seen that in Western countries where during harvest in South Africa you employ 100 people. But in those countries, one machine can take the responsibility of those. We don't want those machines as of now, because really, how are we going to beat unemployment? But we are not saying that we are not skilling our people in terms of usage of technology or digitalization. We are not against digitalization. It is the way to go, but it should contribute in job creation.
Well, certainly quite an important issue that you just mentioned now, the issue around the mining charter and, of course, the mining chamber taking the minister to court, trying to prevent the implementation of the mining charter. But one critical issue that they also raise is that the shares, in terms of the new mining charter, is that the shares that are allocated to the black shareholders must only be sold to another black person, which then means it impacts on the value of that share. How many black people are there who have the type of money to buy a share from another black person who has a share in a company?
The have-nots should not always abuse the courts. The president said, let's debate issues in parliament, not always run to the courts. Let the chamber debate issues with the Minister of Minerals. Also, as transport, we are bringing our transport charter. If you take us to court, we'll look at the judgment and see what are the judges raising, then correct that and implement the charter. We are not going to be frustrated by the courts, and our courts are not reactionary, that if we have got the willingness as government to transform the lives of our people, then the courts will defend the conservatives. No. It is going to be that we'll go to court, come back, correct the situation, and implement transport transformation charter, mineral charter, finance charter, all those charters. We are going to implement them unapologetically to serve the constituency that has voted the ANC into power. And it is time that those who are running those mines, those who are owning big construction companies, meaningfully involve black people in the mainstream.
Well, thank you so much. There we have it from Minister Masanga. But I guess also quite importantly would be the role of the PIC. That what type of companies does the PIC invest in, considering that the PIC is a government entity, and whether those companies meet the quotas that government sets for itself in terms of getting more black people onto boards, getting more black people as directors, but also in terms of what government is pushing currently, which is radical economic transformation, or call it radical socio-economic transformation, whether the state-owned entities are willing to come to the party and ensure that the companies that they invest in and the people that they employ meet the objectives of not only the ANC but also of government. It's back to you in the studio.
Aldrin, thank you so much. Our Aldrin Sampear live from the policy conference, and of course coverage of that continues over the next few